Tomorrow is Jeffrey Epstein's birthday, and today a giant 12-foot replica of the birthday letter that Donald Trump wrote to Jeffrey Epstein for his 50th birthday appeared on the National Mall. An accompanying note says, "Happy birthday. The secret handshake invites you to celebrate the birthday of Donald Trump's closest friend, Jeffrey Epstein, with a larger-than-life tribute to their intimate correspondence." Visitors to the National Mall are asked to sign the birthday card with their own message to the Trump administration.
A 6-month-old baby stops breathing in the back of a family car while federal agents patrol the streets. At the same moment, millions of federal files that could change American history are being hidden in direct defiance of the law. Tonight, we look at the visceral reality of what is happening in our cities and the secrets being kept in the halls of power. Let's play this clip.
Lawrence, not only is he violating the law, the Department of Justice had the audacity to brief Judge Engelmeyer and say that the judge has no authority to enforce the law. In their brief, they say, the judge, you can't do anything if we're violating the law. It was almost insulting the court. And that's why I think we saw these enormously courageous survivors, Haley Robson and Lisa Phillips, write to the court saying, this is causing us trauma. This is not a political football. We have suffered for decades. Please, court, do something so that the law is enforced. And just to remind your viewers, Lawrence, you introduced the nation to these survivors because you had Bradley Edwards on the program with me, and he's the one who introduced me to these survivors who then had the courage to stand in the steps of the Capitol 2 times. And even after the law is passed, they still are having to put themselves out there. It's shameful.
What are the next steps?
Well, Thomas Massey and our lawyer tomorrow replies at the request of Judge Engelmeyer, making the case again for the special master and asking the judge, if he's not going to go as far as a special master, which we think would solve the issue, to at least order the release of some of the key documents. The survivors' statements to the FBI, the 302 statements where they implicate other rich and powerful men who raped them. None of those statements have come out. We want the judge to order the release of that. We want the judge to order the release of the prosecution memo, which details the other co-conspirators. And I am confident that Judge Engelmeyer will do something reasonable and thoughtful.
Imagine a typical American evening. You are doing what millions of families do every single week. You are driving home from your 11-year-old's basketball game. You have your children in the car. You are Sean and Destiny Jackson, a regular family. You are just blocks from home, stopping briefly to pick up Destiny's mother. This is the heartbeat of the American experience. It is mundane, it is safe, and it is predictable. But then the unthinkable happens. Not because of a car accident or a criminal act, but because of a federal intervention. A canister of tear gas explodes directly under the Jacksons' car. The force of that explosion is so great that it actually deploys the car's airbags. Suddenly, the interior of that family vehicle is filled with a thick, poisonous gas. This is not just any gas. This is a chemical agent that is actually banned for use in warfare by the Geneva Convention. Inside that car, the children, the babies, stop breathing. We have heard the testimony of that mother, Destiny Jackson. She describes the scene with a level of detail that shocks the conscience. She looked at her son and saw he was lifeless. There was foam around his mouth. There were tears in his eyes. In that moment of pure terror, she didn't wait for a medic. She began giving her own son mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. She told him, "I will give you all my breath until you get yours back." This is not a scene from a movie. This is a documented event involving federal agents on the streets of Minneapolis. And the fallout did not end on that street corner. The family was eventually rushed to the emergency room, but only with the help of local Minneapolis police and firefighters who had to protect the family from ICE agents who were actually blocking access to help. Once they reached the hospital, the situation remained dire. The family had to be stripped of all their clothes and showered immediately to remove the poisonous chemicals from their skin, their clothing. The very things they were wearing to a basketball game just an hour before had to be treated as hazardous waste. When we hear about federal tactics, we often think of them in the abstract. We think of policy papers or distant news reports. But for the Jackson family, federal tactics meant a 6-month-old baby fighting for his life in a hospital shower. What makes this even more disturbing is the response from the highest levels of our government. Secretary Noem has stood before the public and claimed that these things are not happening. She has said there is no necessity for these chemical agents. But there is video evidence. There are hospital records. There are the families who lived through it. The state representatives in Minnesota are now sounding an urgent alarm. They are telling us that Minneapolis is being made an example of. They believe their city has become a testing ground for an authoritarian, tyrannical regime that is on the march. They are asking a question that every American needs to consider. How much will we tolerate? What kind of country are we going to accept? Because as these representatives warn, Minneapolis is not special. This could be happening in any American city. Any of us could be the Jackson family. This sense of a stress test for American democracy is not just about a single incident with tear gas. It is about a broader pattern of behavior. In Minnesota, the Pentagon has been readying 1,500 soldiers to possibly deploy to the state. This involves the Insurrection Act, a federal law dating all the way back to 1807. This law allows a president to take control of a state's National Guard or even deploy active duty troops domestically in response to what is labeled a rebellion. Invoking this act is an extraordinary move. It hasn't been done since the 1992 Los Angeles riots, which resulted in dozens of deaths and widespread destruction. But there is a crucial difference being highlighted now: the potential use of the Insurrection Act without the approval or consent of the state itself. While these plans for troop deployments are discussed, the atmosphere on the ground remains tense and at times violent. We are hearing reports of what residents describe as an invasion by masked, unidentified secret police. These agents have been accused of using the death of a local constituent, Renee Good, as a tool for intimidation. Renee Good was a neighbor, a person represented by her state officials, who was what some call extrajudicially executed in the street. Rather than offering transparency, the administration has been accused of launching a smear campaign against her. Neighbors who stand up to observe law enforcement, a constitutional right, report being brutalized or threatened. Agents have allegedly looked at residents and asked, "Didn't you learn your lesson? Didn't you see what happened 2 days ago?" This is a strategy of silence. It is a push to make people go back into their houses and stay quiet as their neighbors disappear. It is a test of how much the American public will accept before the system breaks. But the stress test isn't just happening on the streets of Minneapolis. It is happening in our courtrooms and in the very files that the government is required by law to release. This brings us to a second equally serious development: the mystery of the Epstein files. Donald Trump's Justice Department is currently in open violation of federal law. It has been in violation for over a month. The law in question is the Epstein Files Transparency Act. It was a law passed with bipartisan support, pushed through by Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna and Republican Congressman Thomas Massie. The law was clear. It required the full release of millions of unreleased Epstein files by December 19th of last year. But that deadline has come and gone, and the files remain hidden. Why does this matter? It matters because there are survivors who have waited decades for the truth to be acknowledged. Survivors like Haley Robson and Lisa Phillips have joined the request for a special master to be appointed by a federal judge. They want an independent person to force the Trump Justice Department to comply with the law. They are asking the court to ensure that the disclosures are complete and not improperly withheld or over-redacted. They are tired of the delays. They are tired of the discretionary non-compliance that continues to re-traumatize them. In the words of Lisa Phillips, the Department of Justice's conduct constitutes a willful violation of the act. It undermines the trust that survivors and all Americans should have in the integrity of the government. The Justice Department's response to this has been, in a word, shocking. In their legal briefs, they have actually told a federal judge that the court has no authority to enforce the law. They are essentially saying that even if they are violating a law passed by Congress, the judge can't do anything about it. Congressman Ro Khanna described this as insulting the court. It is a stunning display of legal defiance. It suggests an administration that believes it is above the law, whether that law involves the use of chemical weapons on a baby or the release of documents regarding a notorious pedophile. While the Justice Department fights to keep these millions of files secret, they have released less than 1% of the documents. They are specifically withholding the statements survivors made to the FBI, the 302 statements, where they implicate other rich and powerful men who participated in their abuse. They are withholding the prosecution memo that details co-conspirators. This lack of transparency has led some to make bold claims. There are those who argue that if these files were released, the political landscape would look very different today. Some observers have gone so far as to say that Jeffrey Epstein is effectively the most prominent member of the current cabinet. To distract from this legal battle, we see a pattern of diversionary tactics. There are sudden, loud discussions about Greenland or talk of invading Venezuela. These are described by critics as attempts to run the clock and get people to stop caring about the Epstein files. But people are not stopping. On the National Mall, a giant 12-foot replica of a birthday letter appeared. It was a copy of the letter Donald Trump wrote to Jeffrey Epstein for his 50th birthday. It serves as a larger-than-life tribute to what the organizers call their intimate correspondence. It is a physical reminder of a friendship that the administration would seemingly prefer to keep buried in the unreleased millions of files. Even within the political world, the narrative is shifting. Lev Parnas, a figure previously linked to the administration's efforts in Ukraine, has come forward with claims that the entire narrative regarding Hunter Biden was a fabrication. Parnas claims that Russian oligarchs are mentioned in the Epstein files and that the administration knows this. According to Parnas, the efforts to find dirt on the Bidens were lies made up to protect those who are actually named in the secret files. This paints a picture of a system where truth is a secondary concern to power. Whether it is the fabrication of political narratives or the suppression of legal documents, the goal appears to be the same: maintenance of control at all costs. And that brings us back to the streets of Minneapolis. When a mother has to give her baby CPR because of a federal gas canister, and the government responds by putting out a propaganda piece blaming the mother, we are seeing the same mechanism at work. It is the use of power to silence, to smear, and to obscure the truth. The Jackson family, Renee Good, and the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein are all connected by a single thread. They are seeking accountability from a system that is actively resisting it. The state representatives in Minnesota aren't just complaining about a bad day, they are warning of a systemic shift. They see a country where federal agents can operate with masks and no identification, where they can use chemicals banned by international law on civilians, and where they can threaten neighbors for simply watching. They are seeing a stress test, where the administration is checking to see how far they can push the Insurrection Act before the public or the courts push back. There is a growing sentiment that the entire political and legal system needs to be modernized. The goal of such modernization would be to ensure that the tools of the federal government can never again be used to destroy the fabric of American democracy or to protect those who have broken the law. We also see a debate about the consistency of justice. Critics point to cases where the FACE Act was used to sentence people to 10 years in prison for praying near an abortion clinic. And they ask why the same standard of law isn't applied when churches are stormed or when federal laws like the Epstein Transparency Act are ignored. The question is often asked, is it different when one side does it? But for the people in Minneapolis, this isn't about partisan bickering, it is about their lives. Representative state officials say that despite the darkness and the violence of what they call an invasion, they are also seeing a different truth. They are seeing that when things get heavy, people show up for one another. Across the city of Minneapolis, neighbors are looking out for each other. They are standing up for democracy. They are refusing to be intimidated by the masked agents or the threats. They are asserting that they are not just victims of a testing ground, but active participants in the survival of their country. The Jackson family's story is a reminder of the human cost of these political games. A baby's breath should never be a casualty of a pretext for something much larger. A mother's CPR should never be the subject of a government hit piece on social media. As we look at the millions of Epstein files still locked away, and the 1,500 soldiers readying for deployment, and the gas canisters in the streets, the narrative becomes clear. This is a story about the tension between a government's desire for absolute control and a people's right to live in a transparent, safe, and lawful society. The survivors of Epstein are still waiting for their truth. The people of Minneapolis are still waiting for their streets to be safe from their own government. And the American people are still waiting to see if the law actually applies to everyone or if it can be ignored by those with the power to withhold the files. Congressman Ro Khanna remains hopeful that the courts will eventually do something reasonable and thoughtful. But until that happens, the violation of federal law continues, the intimidation on the streets continues, and the diversions about Greenland continue. This is the State of the Union as reported from the front lines of Minnesota and the steps of the federal courts. It is a story of a regular family, a 6-month-old baby, and the millions of secrets that a government is fighting to keep. The question remains for all of us: what kind of country are we going to accept? Because as the warning from Minnesota reminds us, this isn't just their story. This could be happening in any American city. Any of us could be next. We will continue to follow the developments in the request for a special master in the Epstein case, and we will continue to monitor the deployment of federal forces in our cities. Because transparency isn't just a political buzzword, it is the only thing that keeps the testing ground from becoming the new American reality. As we close tonight, remember the Jackson family. Remember the hazardous waste showers and the breath given from a mother to her son. That is the reality behind the policy. That is the truth that no amount of propaganda can erase. Stay tuned as we keep seeking the answers that are currently being withheld in violation of the law. Good night.